Hello everyone, I'm Rupam and welcome again in one more episode of Intimacy Laws. In the last episode, we learned about the relationships, why they do not work, how we are objectified in the modern urban world. And in today's episode, we are going to discuss and we are going to understand about what is the difference between the law and courts. Now, why this fundamental understanding is very important is if you do not understand the fundamental and if you always try to find a solution of a problem, then you are never going to find a problem because life is about living, not about solving problem. Life is never a problem. Alright, having a baby is not a problem. Not having a baby is not a problem. If you still do not have a baby and if you desire a baby, it means that you are still not ready to have a baby. So life is not about pushing. Life is not about following rules. Life is about understanding the world better. There is a meaning behind everything. Nothing is absurd. So if you observe a person murdering another person, there is a meaning. There is a meaning. There is not the motive, but a meaning. And in the modern world, we have invariably replaced the meaning with terms like motive, intentions, the understanding of the world by what to do, how to do, 10 reasons why something doesn't work or 10 ways how to better your life. That doesn't work. Okay? We already know that the world is an extremely complex place, extreme complexity, different dimensions are connected with each other in a very complex, intertwined dynamic. So simplicity doesn't work, and therefore you have to first understand that in order for Einstein to arrive at E is equal to mc square, about 9,000 equations, about 39 years were invested in order to get E is equal to mc square. So knowing E is equal to mc square doesn't give you any wisdom. The process that took for Einstein to arrive at that equation, that process is the knowledge, that process is the actual process of knowing the world, the cosmic world or the quantum world. So the same way, when you look at a world, you're just looking at the world right at this moment. I do not have a job at this moment. What to do? 10 ways to find a job. It doesn't work because the world that you are seeing today has a significant correlation with the past, with your genes, with the past few decades of the development of the place that you are in, your family's past, various other things. And then that is dependent upon the socio-economic factors, cultural factors, the current geopolitical factors, environmental factors, and so on and so forth. So just by learning the new skill, for example, now there is a trend of AI. So just by learning AI, you're not going to get a job because getting a job is not really the problem. Alright, so coming back in this episode, we are going to understand the difference between law and code, and I'm also going to tell you how you can use this understanding in your practical life to make that life more meaningful. We're not solving problems here. We are giving more meaning to the life. Alright. Now, let's first look into the history of civilization a little bit, let me tell you a story. Back in 4000 BC, back in around 4000 BC, in the plain of Mesopotamia, which is currently in Iraq, the modern civilization was developing. Much earlier to that, from around 10,000 BC to about 4000 BC, small settlements, the proto-villages were getting developed on and around entire plain of Mesopotamia and many other places in the world, in China, in Korea, Mongolia, then in Lebanon, modern day Lebanon, then Italy, and then Greece, and of course Crete. There is a small island in the Mediterranean Sea called Crete. So in India, of course. So there were several proto villages that got developed. Now, uh, even in Egypt. Now, then something started happening. The plain of Mesopotamia, in fact, was a cradle of civilization, cradle of civilization. So where people from different places came for trading, they communicated, and that's the reason the language was necessarily got developed. In the Mesopotamian, first written language has been found to be the Sumerian cuneiforms, because when you have so many people coming from different places, from India, the Saudi people, the Lebanon people, the Palestine people, the Syrian people, the people from Egypt, then they all kind of speak or interact in a different ways. Then you needed some kind of written language, some kind of standardization for them to communicate. Excuse me. So that's how the language came into place. The early Sumerian language came into place something around 4000 BC, that is about 6,200 years back from now, and then the modern, then later the more standardized form of Sumerian language came into picture at around 3000 BC, roughly. So Sumer was the southern region of Mesopotamian plain, and so where all the different people they came together. Now, of course, because it was a very prospering region, everybody wanted to come together, construction was required, and therefore a social hierarchy, complex social hierarchy was essential, which was not part of the early village. After 10,000 BCE, when the last ice age got over, when people were living in the villages, of course there were still work division, but when people came together in the large mass, thousands of numbers, 5,000, 10,000, then there was an urban setup, and in the urban setup, randomness could not work anymore. Not everybody could go on and do whatever they wanted. There had to be an order. It's almost like, consider the following statement: I, India, USA, Christianity, Kerala, sea, sun. They make no sense, right? So there has to be a rule that connects these words into a sentence. Then only you can make sense. So the same way, even though the world is chaotic, unless and until there is an order, it doesn't work in a complex dynamic for you alone. A world exploring, it works. But when you want to be with a lot of other people, it doesn't work. If I have developed a way of thinking, then I can tell myself the keywords: India, ocean, Kerala, whatever. That's for me. The way that I think, I can develop my own rules, I can develop my own system, and I can simply think in that way. Nobody bothers. But when it comes to you, or if I have to convey that to you, I have to follow certain rules that you understand, that you also follow the same rules that I understand. And that's why the language was developed. So Sumerian language was developed as part of the requirement for this different group of people to make sense. And so, first time, the order was required. If you have thousands of things, how to organize them, because without the organization, the systems would not be built. So that is how chaotic world started becoming smaller, started becoming organized. And who organized it? Some people out of those who were settling there, who had the ability, who learned the world, who had a greater understanding of the world, they were chosen by the people to take care of that. And those people in Sumerian language are called the Lugals, uh, the great man. All right. So now, once the language got developed, of course, there were many people wanted to come there. The water facility was there, houses were constructed, there was a temple. And around the temple, a large trading got created. Now, on and around 2300 BC, Sargon the Great in the Sumerian plain, he kind of unified the entire Mesopotamia and created the first dynastic rule. So Sargon the Great is essentially the father of the modern day emperors that we get to see. He kind of from north to south Mesopotamia unified. He was a great warrior, and he then developed the concept of regiments, where 5,400 men used to form a regiment, and later on Roman army, kind of Roman legions, they call it Roman legions. They followed the same rule thousands of years later. So 2300 BC, Sargon the Great unified the entire Mesopotamia. Now that again required another set of completely organization rules, significant amount of organization skills, the unification laws from top of the Mesopotamia to the south of the Mesopotamia. Everybody could follow. Certain rules were required because they were now to collaborate and participate in the unified Mesopotamia. It took another 500 years, and in 1800 BCE, on and around 1800 BCE, that 1792 BCE, there was a small place kind of in the center of the Mesopotamia called Babel. So this place, the city of Babel or Babylonian, that Greeks later called, Greek romanticizes a lot of things. So in that city, another Lugal by name Hammurabi, he created a massive civilization, great temples, great architecture, water management system, canals. It was extraordinarily modern city, way ahead of its time. And then Babylon became the center of the earth. Earth was the Mesopotamia, Levant, Egypt, all together in that plain. That was the earth. And Babylon became the center of the earth. It is Hammurabi who created the first set of code called the Hammurabi Code, that is well preserved even today. And that is how that code is still considered as the father of rules, though later they call it a law, but it's essentially a code. What is a code? Code is the way the object should interact. Code is the way that a king should behave, the rights that king should have, the rights that civilians should have, who can become the civilian of the city. They built massive walls around the city to protect, you know, external forces to come and jump into the city. Migration were stopped. So citizenship rules were created. So entities were defined, the objects were defined. Who is a priest? What are the roles of the priest? Who is a civilian? What are the roles of civilian? Who is a farmer? What are the roles of farmer? Who is a king? What are the roles of king? Then the set of punishments were different. You take somebody's eyes, somebody should take your eyes also. So the eye for an eye comes from the Hammurabi code. Alright, it was pretty, but it was the first written code. It was very essential because it created, it put the basis of first, which you call the global civilization, because Babylon becomes a global place everywhere. People come to Babylon and then they explore, they trade, they visit the temples, pilgrimage, and then there were lodges, there were brothels, of course, there were entertainment centers. So Babylon became really modern city where people all around that smaller globe, they came and they interacted. People came for selling, people came for buying, they got all the essentials from Babylon. And that Hammurabi's code, that acted as how people should interact with each other, how people should see what is a priest, what are the other things. And it is the Hammurabi's code which first brings the marriage law, where a girl is considered to be a property of the father, who is to be given during the marriage to her husband. Husband has to take care of the wife, the girl, for rest of his life. The husband the girl has to, quote unquote, give the husband a male child, a male inheritance, and if the wife fails to do so, the male can have a concubine, another female, take her womb, that is, impregnate her and get a baby. But that would require wife's approval. So a man would take wife's approval, get another lady, pregnant her, have the baby. He and his wife will have the baby. So they were the rules of Hammurabi. Now you understood fundamentally where the modern day law comes from. It comes kind of 1800 BC is the beginning of modern day so-called law, and Hammurabi's code is the basis of that. Now, in this episode, I promise that I'll make you understand or help you understand what is the difference between a law and a code, and the history is very, very essential, to know what is the context. Now you know there is a chaotic world, and then we need set of rules, set of code to make an order, and this set of code are to be accepted by everyone for a system, for a system to exist in a chaotic world, so that everybody can interact smoothly. That was the fundamental of the language. And then as we went forward, a lot of other places were connected through wars and through treaties. And then further complex codes were required. And then when we came to 1800 BC, in the city of Babel, the trade, pilgrimage. It was just an overpopulated city with a lot of facilities, so I required a lot of complex interaction dynamics and definitions were required, and that's why Hammurabi's code is very important. So at this moment, you have to understand that a code is something that organizes objects, that organizes and defines objects and their interactions, so called relationship. Let me repeat, a code is something that defines the object, defines the relationship between the objects, that is interaction, and this code serves an eventual goal. Marriage code: daughter, an object; father, an object. Father owns the object daughter. Marriage, a interaction; husband, a object. Father takes the control of the daughter object, gives it to the husband object. Husband object leaves with the wife object. They produce a child object. If they cannot produce a child object, another object called concubine can be brought in. Husband can have a sexual relationship with the concubine to produce the child. Once that process is over, this relationship is over, then the child becomes the child of the mother. Alright, so you define the object, then you write the code, how the object, what are the properties of the object and how the object would work. And then based on the failure system, you define a reward and punishment code. You promise. The reward is always obviously a promise. If you marry, you have a child and you have a great future. That's obviously always a promise. But the punishment is not a promise. Punishment is always real. For example, the punishment for the wife object to cheat the husband object was very severe. It was like weeping and the other thing. Let us not go into it. So what is a code? A code is one that defines an object, properties of the object, functionalities of the object, and defines an interaction between multiple objects to perform certain functionalities. That is exactly the way software codes are written. So in the software code, you first define variables, which are objects, and then you define, you create a class, you have properties, you have function definition. You first create an abstract model, then you inherit that abstract class, expand the class, create the functionality. Then in the application class, you define an object of that class. Each object further has a name. So you define that object and then you interact between the object. You may, inherit from one property of the object or mix two properties of the object and so on and so forth. So modern day software coding also goes back to Hammurabi's time, and some other day I'm going to tell you where from it comes and how this is also linked with early Mesopotamian civilization, but not today. So we understand that there is a chaotic world, and in that chaotic world, nothing is fixed. Then we have to build a system which is a small version, like a fish tank, where certain things have to be defined, things have to be objectified, and then their relationships have to be defined. And all of this is being done by a code. So a good code is something which makes that system work. Of course, every code will have a failure point. That's why we have the testers. But eventually, this is how the code was. One of the modern day law studies goes back to about 530 AD. That is after that, when Christianity was already the major religion of the Roman Empire. The traditional Western Roman Empire was gone, and it was more or less the Eastern Roman Empire, but some other day. and it was established in the place called Beirut, modern day Lebanon, Beirut. So the reason the law school was popular was, of course, because Lebanon was one of the places which was closely connected with the ancient Mesopotamia for a very long period of time, 4,000 years. And this is where the people traded, this is where the people transferred technologies, they understood technologies. So the law worked because inherently those who were going into the Beirut Law School, they understood a lot of other things. They understood technology, they understood human dynamics, they understood human interaction, they understood how system works, they understood how the systems have been built because they have been traditionally genetically part of that. Law is what you understand by the modern day law. It is not law, it is justice, civilian justice. 4 year study of the codex. In fact, the study was called the codex. Alright, they were very precise about the definitions. The Greeks, the Romans, the Mesopotamians. They were not like modern day where everything got diluted. So a code is something that provides object definition in a chaotic system, then interconnects and defines the relationship between the objects to make a system and let the system work. And the study of that code is called justice, because code is written in a very linear fashion. World is not linear, we already know, but the code is written in a linear fashion, top down fashion. If this then that, if this then that, if this then that, if this then that. Husband gives the father object, gives daughter object to the husband object gives some money to the father object, or father object gives some money to the daughter object for transporting. Right? Then in this specific way code is written, but because the world is complex, not every human being would be able to follow the code, right? Because it's not natural, it's created by human based on that specific civilization, that specific timeline, and created by those who had a greater understanding of the world. For example, Hammurabi had a great understanding of the world. He rised from the bottom, he interacted with people, right? And so when you look into the codes, it's just like the modern day programs. Alright, you have the objects, you have the classes, different classes like priest, you have different classes like farmers, there is an interaction, the agriculture is, there is an interaction. And then there is a law. So this law is why the system works the way they work, and being created by Lugal, from which the current name of legal system has come. So interestingly, what we call law today is essentially the codes that create a system in a chaotic world, just like your programming code. You have set of rules. The codes are written by following set of rules. There are definitions, there are classes, there are objects, there are name of the objects, classes are their properties and the functions, and that's how you build a code. A code is set of instructions that creates a system which works. It's tested and that's how it works. Law is the principle of that system. Why the code should be written? So for example, you have Ohm's law, right? V is equal to IR, and that law fails when the resistance becomes zero, when there is a short circuit. So that law took years for Om to arrive at. However, if you understood the law, you would know that this law requires you to be very cautious about the short circuit, because in the short circuit the law doesn't work. So, based on the Ohm's law, that is I is equal to V by R, and then power is equal to I square R, you can create different circuits. So now, for example, you have a bulb, torch bulb, 2.4 watt torch bulb that you can really create with a 1.5 volt battery and a 470 ohm resistance, right? But this is following the principle of Ohm's law. The code is that, okay, you can create a glowing bulb by taking a torch of 2.4 watts, adding it into the battery with a 471 ohm resistance, and it works. Now the problem is, based on this law, there are various permutation and combinations possible. There are actually infinite number of permutation and combination possible. And when you look into that system, if you just going with the code, you have to remember all the values, which is not possible. So now consider that you create a book with all the possible values of voltage, resistance and current, and you call that a law, and you want people to remember that. It doesn't work that way. If you know the law, you can write the code. If you are using a 230 volt AC supply, then you'd probably be going for not 2.4 watt bulb, but rather a 100 watt bulb, and the resistance value will of course change, isn't it? It's so simple. So if you understand the law, you can create code accordingly. If you know the rules of the C programming, you can create the programs. If you know how C++ works, you can create classes, you can create objects, you can define properties and functionalities inside the classes, and then you can create the program that you want. However, if you do not know these rules and the law and just remember the code, then things stops working whenever there is a stressor. For example, many engineering students, they just memorize the code, C program. There are some 8 programs in their lab, and then they just memorize. It works in a very small world. In the exam, only those program comes, and so you can remember, you can afford to remember, memorize and reproduce, but those are not going to stay with you for your entire life. Let's say you want to make any other program, then you have to learn the law, learn the rules, learn the system of coding. So what we understand is there is a chaotic world, and then that chaotic world has to be made sense and has to be made to work by finding out the laws, which is a discovery process. Of course, the laws do not change. Principally, Earth will always be revolving around the sun in an elliptical path. That is a law. It doesn't change, right? Now, if you understood the law, well, then you can find the rules. There is a gravity in place. There is a law of gravity that makes it possible. Then there are other laws of space-time, relativity, so on and so forth. So the reason laws don't work in the relationship is essentially because they are not the laws but the code. You can't follow the code, you have to understand the law, isn't it? Because there is infinite number of code possible, infinite number of permutation and combination possible, and you cannot simply memorize each and every aspect of it. You have to understand that code, you have to understand the rules, the laws, so that you can create your own code as and when the situation changes. Codes cannot be permanent. That's the reason legal system keeps expanding, because you keep on changing the code, the modification. You call it a law, but you keep on changing. They will obviously evolve, just like the software evolves. The legal system will evolve because the fundamental principle of both of them are same. Similar way, because relationship, as you know, mother-son relationship, wife-husband relationship, because essentially that relationship what comes from this system, where a human is first seen as a class, an object of a class, and then the relationship or the transaction of different objects of these classes, how they interact is defined using codes. It's exactly the same way that you interact, but because of the oversimplification in the modern day, the laws are being totally kept aside, the rules are being totally kept aside. People want to just remember few code and work accordingly. That is, child becomes 2 year old, we have to send him to play school. He becomes 3 year old, we have to give him to nursery school. Good education is required. These are codes. They don't work if you don't understand the law, because you have to be able to change the code, to change a system, to adapt to a new system, to build new system as far as the requirement is concerned. You know that a lot of time you spend with your mobiles. Okay, just check social media in the mobile. That's kind of a code you follow. Get up early in the morning, check your emails, check social media. Now imagine there is a situation where there is a flood in your city. There is no current and there is no internet connection for 10 days. Now what you are going to do after waking up early in the morning? Because you have memorized the code that I have to check my mail, answer few mails, and I have to check social media account in my mobile. Now in that situation, neither there is a current nor an internet connection, nor does your mobile work. So what you are going to do? See, it's a very simple situation, and still it fails. The code fails. That's primarily the reason why relationships keep failing, because you focus a lot on those codes, and the codes that you adopt are the codes that others are following. It's a very simple way of living a simple life, but it doesn't work under the stressor. And in most relationships, there are two different persons. Objectification itself is hard. And then after you objectify, you simplify those objects and you follow a same code. You cannot remember the code of factorial throughout your life if you had done that in your engineering college. Can you? You cannot. So that is the reason a mother doesn't understand. If the child is not listening to her, what should she do? Because that's not part of the code. That is the reason you have to understand the principles of law, which is the answer of why. Ohm's law is why. That is, a law never changes. Okay? The meaning of the words do not change. That's law. It's a linguistic law. There is a law following which a language works. They don't change. Then you can use that law and the rules to create poetry. Poetry is a code. To create a blog, that's a code. To create a scientific paper, that's a code. But what you are essentially doing is you are essentially creating your own code, isn't it? That is the reason in the relationship Your first and foremost goal should be to, to understand laws, to understand the rules, and then start playing around with those codes. You cannot memorize the code and expect a relationship to work. Codes are not laws. Whether you call codes a law, create several thousand books with different set of values with of V, I and R, that doesn't work. Because as a human, you cannot remember all those words. The brain looks for meaning. Law is the meaning. Brain looks for a process. The rules are the process. Brain doesn't look for the outcome. You cannot simply remember 6 plus 4 is equal to 10, 5 plus 5 is equal to 10, 3 plus 7 is equal to 10. Those are codes. Outcome. You able to understand? So that is the reason relationship is very foundation to life. You may have everything in life, but if you don't have a good relationship, it doesn't work. And just like any other thing, because from the childhood you are not taught about the laws and the rules of the relationship. You just know some codes that don't work. So when you are not concerned about learning the fundamentals, learning the truth, discovering the laws that make something happen at every level, and when you choose to remain ignorant about most important things in your life, which is relationship, because if there is no other human in your life, you are pretty much alone, who just cannot live a life. And that's the reality. Even for water, somebody is working in dams and in water processing plants for you to even have that water. So you are always dependent on people. Okay, there always exists a relationship in the urban setup, and then there always exist laws. There always exist rules. Codes are just the outcome to make a system work. You just cannot become part of a system without knowing these things. I hope I've been able to convey you the meaning of laws and codes and why relationships do not work if you don't pay attention and if you don't pay your uh, time, energy, emotions into learning the laws and the rules, exploring them, and if you simply follow the codes and that to those codes which others are following, then it's not going to work. And so now you cannot say that you did not know it earlier. Start taking relationships and people in your life very seriously. Start understanding the world in better ways very seriously. Start taking fundamentals very seriously. When you understand those fundamentals, life becomes easier. Don't make your life complicated by just memorizing the code. Remember, complexity results in simplicity. Simple things results in complication. Complexity results in simplicity. Simplicity results in complication. You have to go through all those learnings to arrive at the wisdom. You cannot take wisdom as the knowledge. Thank you for your precious time that you spent with me today. I hope you learned something. Please share your thoughts and comments in the comment section. Thoughts and real life experiences in the comment section. Please share with me If you face any issues regarding understanding the laws, please also mention any of the topics that you want me to try to explain you, try to help you understand. See you in the next episode. Till then, have a great day. Thank you.